Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dillon, I'm your host. And today, guys, we are going to be talking about really the pros and cons of licensing in the AEC industry. So basically the built environment. We're going to be talking about licensing requirements primarily for architects and engineers. So with that, without further ado, we'll get right into it. So this first came up actually from a post I saw on LinkedIn. And really, I didn't want to just respond with a comment. There's so many of these things that are big topics that really just shouldn't be dealt with in the comment section. Like, we need to be a little more thoughtful about our responses, actually take some time to think about our responses. And then, I put together an article that I posted on LinkedIn. Some of this I'm going to read through and other, and then add more commentary around it for the podcast. But that's basically where this came from, is really throwing out the question of, are licensing requirements basically helping or hurting the AEC industry, and how do we go about it? So with this, and basically large issues, like, again, you can't solve these things in like 100 characters or even 100 words on the internet. Like, that's not going to help any of this. So again, think through your responses when it comes to the internet and all that kind of stuff. I Unless I've really thought through my position on something, I don't typically respond in a comment form. Now I will, or if it's on my own post, something I've thought about, like, then I'll respond to comments in that, because I've thought about the topic. I have, my line of thinking already pretty much thought through on this. And then it's usually to enlighten it, right? Like, I'm not going to antagonize or entice stuff. I know a lot of people do that on like LinkedIn or whatever, just for the, clickbait, because then the engagement, sends their posts through the roof. But I don't want to be known for any of that kind of stuff, right? I'm here to help, here to grow. And, that's where it's at. And then with that, these are my thoughts as of, January of 2025 on these things. My evolution of thinking could very much change. But as of today, these are my thoughts. This is where I stand. And here we go. So when I dove into this on the licensing piece, it's fairly new in the history of things, right? Like, the Egyptians weren't pulling permits to put up the pyramids, like, it's not what happened. Um, like, permitting and licensure is like a very, very new thing. So dating back to 1907 in Wyoming, was like the first licensure. I'm sure that this had to do with some conmen and landlines, because it was for surveying, was where these licensure things started in Wyoming. I'm sure in the West that they had some basically land disputes that ended up in this. Like, I didn't dig deep enough to find, where it started, but it was survey licensure that was the first one issued 1907 in Wyoming. So that is the fact that 1907 was the first issuance of a license that was for land surveying in Wyoming. California actually came in second in 1929, and it became the second state to require an engineering license. And really, this was from basically a year or so earlier, where the failure of the St. Francis Dam killed 491 people. And I'm sure there was some uproar about that, right? That you had somebody that designed this thing and it ended up failing. Again, for whatever reason that failed, you had an uproar in society about the failure of it, just like you had the uproar in Wyoming, 20 years earlier, about somebody got their land taken or wrong survey lines or sold a bill of goods, right? Whatever that amounted to at that time, I'm sure is, basically what ended up happening shortly thereafter. Then over time, right, the government has gotten more and more involved, right? Requirements have increased. We added more disciplines like electrical, mechanical, plumbing, right? Like, HVAC systems basically were a product of the 60s, 70s primarily, with VAV, variable air volume stuff, versus like just the radiant tubing or any of the radiant systems that we had previously for mechanical systems, right? Like, heating, cooling outside of just a fireplace, really just for heating, is pretty new. AC is very new. than how we deal with hot weather. So again, these are all very like new things. Indoor plumbing, again, product of like the 40s and 50s. So and then over time, licensures also expanded to all the other industries, right? Medicine, barbers, doctors, contractors, right? There's licensure for a ton of stuff. And the merits of other industries can be debated elsewhere, whether a doctor needs to be licensed or a barber, or any of that kind of stuff, right? So the question comes down to, are these requirements still necessary today? And it's a good question, and things should be thought about from time to time. So here's my answer in short and long form. In short, are licensing requirements still necessary? Yes, I do believe so. The long answer to that is similar to the things that went through in 1907. Like there's still, and I see it from the different states that I'm licensed in, and the board sending out information, is people are still promoting themselves as engineers when they're not licensed. Whether their work product is good or not, I couldn't tell you. But again, you still have basically con artists, and I don't think con men are ever going to go away. That's something that's here to stand. That it happens all the time, from financial schemes to people passing themselves as one thing and really they're another. I mean, this happens all the time. It's not going to go away. Con men are going to exist for time immemorial. It's just part of human nature. Like that is a thing that unfortunately will not go away. So we have to put measures in place to deal with it. And then the flip side of that, right, is like, should the government be the one to do this? It's a hard piece, right? Like I'm more for government out of things than in things. But at the same time, you need some independent third party to do it and vet it. Should that be private? I don't know, right? Like that there should be some form of licensure, mainly to help with the qualification process, right? Like in engineering and buildings in particular, we are doing health and life safety of these structures, right? And people's well-being, and they're going to make it out in case there's a fire, all that kind of stuff. When at the same time, like I've said this for years too, on the like automotive industry, there's really no need for licensure at the end of the day for that, right? Like there truly isn't. Nobody signs off on the structural designs of anything or structural integrity. Really, at the end of the day, it's a crash test from the Department of Transportation and Safety. Like I think that's who ends up doing all the crash tests that you see for cars. So they ultimately sign off whether the thing is safe or not. But then again, we've seen how that worked for Health and Human Services in that department, and the Department of NIH, right, the National Institute of Health, and how they've gone through things, and the USDA has approved stuff or not for health. Like government has not had a good track record of approving private industry things. But again, those are also all industries where no one person is ultimately responsible. Like the company are not responsible for most of those things, which is, again, this is kind of what it comes down to, right? Is like the individual responsibility, where the individual in, the doctor shoulders a lot of burden in the medical industry, and then the architect and engineer shoulders individually a lot of responsibility in the engineering industry. So, where the risk and liability lies for the individual, versus the company is, part of this too is like the legal nature of the US and what it has become, right? And basically shielding people professionally from liability and risk. And that's kind of where this conversation ultimately goes, is, it's part of a risk equation, right? Like if you had a person that was not licensed and designed, then ultimately the owner would assume more of that risk because they hired a non-qualified professional to do things. But this is like the weird path you ultimately go down, right? You're trying to mitigate risk for each and every project that you undertake, right? Each building is unique in its own special way. And so you try to mitigate all those risks by having qualified people. It's done through the permitting office and plan review to make sure that those buildings are up to standards. that they're approved by the fire marshal in the event that they have to come and rescue people out of this building, put fires out or anything like that. That's ultimately what we're going down is, the qualifications of the people to get there. Now in engineering, there's a few things that I do want to note. And how do you get your license? So there's basically you graduate from an accredited university. There are in other states, or in some states, they have the path where if you've worked in the industry for 10 years, then you can go and sit for your exams for your PE, and that kind of qualifies you through it. So first you go to an ABET accredited university, graduate, or you get your degree, but you can take your what they call the fundamentals of engineering exam basically in your senior year, April of your senior year. You're then able to take that exam. From there, once you pass, you work for 4 years under a PE. After those 4 years, you're then able to sit for the professional engineering exam for your specific discipline. So again, I was electrical engineer, so I took the electrical power PE exam. It's an 8-hour exam for that. You take it, you wait your however long it takes to grade it or whatever, and then you get your licensure. So they've changed this somewhat since I took it. But basically you take your test. Once you pass, then you fill out all your applications. And with that, you have to have 5 references from professional engineers. So you have 5 references from people that you've worked with or worked under to recommend you to take your license. So they do have to sign off on you. And then, basically put the things you've done for the last 4 years. And then that allows you to go and, get your license, all that kind of good stuff with your transcripts from your undergrad, your FE exam, your PE exam, your references, all this type of stuff, your work experience, and then you submit it, and then that gets put as a package to the state board that you go and put your license under. And then from there, you get basically approved or not. So, and then in each state, you have continuing education requirements that you have to meet on typically a biannual basis. So every 2 years, you have, 15 to 30 continuing education units or hours that you have to go through to basically allow you to renew your license. So you have continuing education requirements that you're forced to kind of go through to keep your license every year, plus pay all your fees to do that. So in total, like the system that we have now in promoting engineers, creating engineers is honestly pretty good, right? And I'm speaking to the engineering side of it, because in reality, like not everyone is meant to be an engineer, right? And we shouldn't dumb down requirements to put more people through the system, right? You want qualified people, especially in health, wellness, life safety that we're talking about, right? Making sure your air quality is good, making sure that your building stands up straight, making sure your electrical systems are designed properly for the loads that you're going to put on the building, right? That your grounding systems are like all these things that go into a project. Architecture, same way, because there's honestly a lot of architects that go through school, but the amount that pass the tests are very few, right? So you have this huge basically vetting process where you go to any architecture school, but not every architecture school is built well enough to basically geared to passing the architecture exams. Like those pass rates are very, very low, which just tells me that one, the schools are real shitty at preparing people to basically be a professional, right, in their chosen field. So you have an education problem, then you have a study problem, right? And people, they've got to get their work experience and all that kind of stuff. And so they're, they don't study properly for these tests that are very difficult for architects to take. But again, we shouldn't make it any easier for dumb people to, design these buildings and these systems. Like that should not be what we're after here. Because again, let's face it, most people are not cut out to be engineers. It's a small portion of the population. So in 2022, I went and looked up these stats. There were 192,474 engineers that graduated from college, right? So in 2022, you had 192,474 engineers graduate compared to 4.11 million total college graduates. So that's 4.68%. 4.68% graduated as engineers in 2022. So like it is a small, it's less than 5% of the population are engineers. So 1 in 20 people are engineers. That's just what it amounts to. And then of those that get licensed, so in graduating, so of my graduating class, so for electrical, there were 4 of us basically that went into the building sciences out of the 400 and something that graduated in my class of engineers, like total, right? Not just electrical. We only had 50 in the electrical department. So 4 out of 400. So we had 1% of all engineers be electrical. And then of that, we had, well, 4 of us did get our PEs. So you have 1% of the total population. So of that 192,474 times 0.01, that's 1,900 new PEs that you can make every 4 years after that, right? If you had 1% that went through in electrical, and really it's going to be probably, again, small portion of that. So, and then that stay in the building industry. Of the 4 of us that were power focused, 2 of us went, so that number gets cut in half again. And that's, a university that had a power program. So that's 962. And then probably half of that, would stay. So you get 500 engineers a year that are probably going to be in the industry more than 5 years is what we realistically end up looking at. So it's such a small percentage, and you have to like understand these numbers. I know I'm putting a lot of numbers through to you guys, but there's no way to really convey this, that again, 4.11 million people graduated, and then you're only going to put 500 people, 500 electrical engineers as across the country a year into the industry that stay. So, and then of that, of the others, they'll go into facilities engineering or plant engineer or something like that, right? So they're still going to be somewhat industry adjacent, but they're not going to be the ones designing, putting together new projects. So for our industry, of the AEC industry, when it comes to engineers, like you really don't have many people that stay relatively. You only create those 500 every new year. And again, for electrical, multiply that by, 2 or 3 for mechanical, because there's just more mechanical guys in the industry. But again, not many are going into AEC of engineering, right? They're going to go into other disciplines, other areas. So again, it's like very, very small portions of people of a given demographic that are going to come into like the building trades. So one, just because it's difficult, just because not many people come into the industry, doesn't mean that we should relax any of our requirements. And I think this is where, like, in so many industries, so many areas, that you start dumbing stuff down because you aren't getting enough people into it or whatever. And ultimately my answer is like, you got to try harder, man. Like, this is not for everybody. If you're meant to be in this industry, if you're meant to work in it, you will. If you want to be here, then you will. If all of us were more attractive into people coming into the industry and showing what the building industry could be, more people would work in it. Like, it is really that simple, but it takes a collective to do that. And again, dumb people should not be engineers. Like, why would we dumb down the requirements to be an engineer, to be licensed, to do all these things, when, like, the operation of a multi-million-dollar building is in the hands of one person, right? Like electrical systems in particular, if you don't size the cable correctly or it burns up, like, you could just put $100 million facility out of business, right? Like, or generators not firing up or sized correctly in hospital systems. Now you're killing a whole bunch of people that are on life support. And like, this is a very blunt thing that, again, not everybody's cut out to be an engineer, and that's okay. Like, dude, there's again, 4.11 million people graduated from college. Like, all those people, go into some career field more than likely. There's jobs and places for everybody. And maybe you're not going to be the stamping engineer for this stuff. Maybe you're great at BIM and coordination and doing that type of stuff, right? Not running calculations and doing those pieces. Like there is a place for you within the industry. And I think we just have to understand like there are places for you, but to hold the title of architect, of engineer, like these aren't titles for everybody. And that's okay, guys. Like it is okay. So I'm saying all this to say, like, I believe that the testing requirements should stay in place. I believe that we should continue to educate our people coming up. I believe that firms should encourage people to take the PE exam, to give them the necessary study materials and all the help that they need to pass the test. Like again, not everyone's going to, but this doesn't mean that we don't help people to pass the exam, give them all the help and assistance that they need to pass the exam. Like we need more architects, we need more engineers, licensed architects and licensed engineers. And it's just like the structural guys, you know, if you have a designation that says SE behind your name and that structural engineering designation, I mean, that is a very tough designation to get, very hard exams, 2 8-hour exams. And the guys that I know that have them are incredibly smart, incredibly hardworking. And I wouldn't want some, you know, dumb guy to hold that designation, right? Like, because they made the test easier. Like, that doesn't make sense. I mean, these are the folks that are putting up skyscrapers and designing the structural elements of, you know, skyscrapers. Like, they are very important, very smart, very hardworking guys that end up getting that designation as well they deserve. So again, this is merit-based society. It should stay merit-based society. You know, the tests are made by engineers for engineers. They're made for architects by architects, and it should stay that way. So that's my, again, long answer on licensing requirements. Is it completely perfect? No. Are there some people that, you know, maybe should or is well qualified as other engineers to do it, but never went and took the test? Yeah, probably. I mean, there's designers out there that just never went and took it, never went to school, or, you know, they had the 10 years of experience, but decided they didn't want the responsibility of an engineer. Because again, it does come with a lot of additional responsibility, a lot of additional risk, a liability. Your name is now, you know, on drawings, and it's your name at the end of the day and responsibility. And some people don't want that either, right? So there is a lot of weight that comes with that stamp and that license. And it's not meant for everybody, and that's okay. But that's my stand on it. Thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Construction Corner podcast. Until next time.